Looking at the flood, the fairy flood as was called it this morning, and we say counting the losses, what of next time? Now, as the days go by, many more communities located in areas not easily covered by the media tell their losses from rampaging floods which seem to be overwhelming Nigeria.
As if the progression of the flood is from north to south of Nigeria, communities in the riverine and Niger Delta are as of Nigeria as of now, are being overrun after many towns and local communities in the northern states were washed away by angry flood from overflowing rivers.
Just on Tuesday, a Catholic priest, Reverend Father Theodos Akpa, told AIT that Ibadan local government of Kogi State has been submerged by the flood, creating a humanitarian crisis.
The priest said houses in the entire community has been submerged, crops and farms washed away, and animals drowned. The situation has forced communities to flee, seeking for refuge anywhere they can find it.
The disaster has become so widespread that it seems that the nation and its agencies charged to respond in time like this have become overwhelmed and overpowered.
Now, the irony is that the present flood being experienced all over Nigeria was presented by weather experts in the country.
So, why did the National Emergency Management Agency seem to have been caught unaware? Indeed, was there anything the agency could have done to avert the kind of situation which many Nigerian communities are presently faced with? This Thursday, we have in the studio the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, and we would have him coming on later, but right now he's not in the studio, but we'll have some very important guests in our studio. We have Prince Barrister Shedrack Akolokwu, political economist, mass communicator, sustainable development expert, and lawyer. You're welcome to Kakakiv this morning, sir.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome. We also have Lindsay Barrett, veteran journalist. You're welcome as well. And we also have Al Hassan Nuhu, Deputy Director, Planning, Research and Forecasting, National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Nice to have you join us.
Thank you.
All right, sir. I'm sure you heard our interest from the extreme north to the southern fringes. Nigerian communities are submerged underwater. And what is worrying right now is the fact that there were warnings. Not just this year, not just early, there were warnings in June, but there were also warning in 2011 that the floods that we'll be experiencing in 2012, the federal government had better be prepared. And now it has come, it is happening. How come Nigeria found itself in this mess? Why was the federal government unable to curb the menace of this flooding? So I'll start with you.
Well, granted that in 1972, we did not participate at the Stockholm Conference on the environment. But in 1992, Nigeria was well represented at the Rio Conference on climate change. And in June this year, we were also in Rio with a very large delegation to discuss climate change. The issue is not just about responding to emergencies. The issue has to do with planning on a long-term basis. The challenge of flooding in Nigeria has always been there. First, we need to understand the river system in Nigeria, the interconnectivity of the rivers, their flow patterns, and the things they do in the course of the rivers, flowing to the delta. Mark you, there is only one delta in the entire country, but all the rivers are connected, so that everything that happens in any part of Nigeria by way of rainfall, by way of overflowing of banks of major rivers, or even by way of overflowing of dams, end up in the Niger Delta. Now, I had opportunity to say that the challenge we have today can be traced back to 1973 when the Lagdo Dam was being built in the Cameroons. And Nigeria was supposed to have played a partnership role with the Cameroons. And that rule, I don't know what happened down the line. And so, it is not the first time we're experiencing this kind of flooding. It's been there, it's just that it's been underreported. Every year, the rains come into West Africa, Central Africa, and all of them empty into these two major rivers and their affluents. Now, let me take the connections that you have in the major rivers so that you can understand what I'm talking about. The Benue rises from the Cameroons. And at the point where the Benue rises, it receives its headwaters from the Faro.
Okay.
And then the Faro, between the Benue and the Faro is where the Lagdo Dam is located. Nigeria ought to have built a counter dam since it didn't participate in the building of the Lagdo Dam, which has about 12 turbines. It should have built another dam at a place called Dasin Hausa or Wuro Alhaji at worst. Now the Benue flows into Nigeria and enters Adamawa State. First it receives water from the Gongola at a point in Minan. Then it receives water from the Ngurore. It receives water from the Mayo Ine. These are rivers that flow from the Cameroons and on the islands, on the highland areas. And also recall that the topography of Nigeria is not even. The topography is in favor of the mountainous ranges from the Biu Highlands, the Shefshi, the Mandara Mountains, the Micha Hills, up to the Mambila Plateau, down to the Udi Hills and the Urban Hills. Now, after Numan, the Benue still receives more water. The Benue receives the Taraba. The Benue receives the Katsina Ala before flowing into Lokoja. On the other hand, look at the river Niger. The river Niger runs for about 4,160 kilometers from the Fulajeno Highlands into the Gulf of Guinea. And about half of that stretch is located in Nigeria. Now, the bulk of the water is supplied into the Niger by the Rima, the Sokoto, the Shiroro, the Gurara, the Kaduna, before flowing into Lokoja. After Lokoja, the two rivers meet, and the next major receipt of water is the Anambra, which comes all the way from the Woody Hills. What you call the Oji River flows into the Anambra and empties into the Niger. Now they go down. If we must contain this river network, and we first of all have to understand that the river network is itself a major national resource that should be utilized. On the other hand, you find that it's not only the Niger and the Benue. You find the Cross River again coming from the Cameroons. The Cross River comes into Nigeria through Ikom, and then it flows down through the Benue State and all the rest, and comes into the Atlantic, not connected to the Niger.
Okay, first I will hold you there, right there. I'm sure a lot of people are saying, wow, we have a lot of connecting rivers, and Nigeria should have been aware of this and known the damage thereof. I'll come to you, Nite. Now, the talk about global warming and climate change cannot be overemphasized. I'm sure Nigeria is not new to it, and they were also aware that this could also be part of the reason why there is so much flooding in Nigeria, especially in Africa. It's not only in Nigeria, we have Ethiopia, we have Uganda. Flooding is around the world. Now let's look at management of emergencies. Let's look from the United States, because we seem to draw our yardstick a lot from them. They have Hurricane Katrina, they've had Hurricane Isaac this year, which was one of the worst they've had in years. Now what is different is because they were prepared, and people actually knew that this disaster was going to come. So they had like key federal management agencies, which one of them was FEMA, which was in charge of relocating individuals in case of this kind of emergencies. Now we have NEMA in Nigeria. Now, NEMA might not be categorically responsible for relocating people, but they are responsible for the warning. Now, there should also be an agency, because one of the complaints people have made is, oh, you tell us, you warn us, where do we go to? Who do we run to? And how do we facilitate our movement? So, where is the line drawn here between NEMA and their roles and responsibilities? Because it's not enough to issue out a warning. There should also be some sort of assistance to the people who this damages are coming to.
I think I'd like to pass that question to Nuhu.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me first of all start from this angle that NEMA was taken unaware. No. There were signs which were transmitted as early as March.
Okay.
NIMET brought out their own prediction, and after which we gather experts that came and sat down and sip out emergency implication, disaster management implication of that prediction, which was disseminated as early as March to responsible authorities across jurisdictions, to people and community at risk. The early warning system is a system. It entails the risk knowledge, the mechanism of transmitting that knowledge to those who take action, the responsible authorities across jurisdiction, and the capability of those who are going to take action, and the capability of communities at risk to be able to utilize those informations. These informations were disseminated as early as March, and when the rain started, the Federal Ministry of Environment were issuing out warnings regularly, which were also being disseminated to all the jurisdictions. Early warning system is a system, and any malfunction in any component of the system brings down the whole system. The most important component of early warning system is actually the capability of authorities and communities at risk to be able to utilize that warning. And there is a lot of problem there, because when these warnings were disseminated, it passed to the state. We work with the state, with the local government, with the community. Okay. And before the rains come, there was sufficient awareness creation, sufficient advocacy to let the people know that this hazard is coming and you need to relocate to higher grounds. And when the
let's talk about now that the flooding has come,
when
and the communities are, submerged, it looks to me like NEMA is overwhelmed by the situation, because there's flooding almost in every part of the country right now. So what has been NEMA's response in tackling this flooding?
In each of the scenarios, from Adama down to Benue, down to Plateau, down to Kogi, NEMA has came in before the commencement of the flood to identify higher grounds that people will be relocated, and facilitated in conjunction with the state emergency management agencies to set up internally displaced people's camp, to provide search and rescue, to provide immediate relief assistance, food, medicament, water and sanitation, health.
But how much of that really has been done? Because we've been to some primary schools where these people have been relocated to, and the complaint is the same. We don't have water, we don't have food. They came here the other day, they are not here today. Sometimes they're here, sometimes we get, sometimes we don't. So that's why I asked, are you sure NEMA's being able, NEMA's not, the pressure of this situation has not been overwhelming, and maybe NEMA does need some support?
You see, this endeavor is a multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder, multi-resource. The Ministry of Health takes charge of health issues. There are 7 clusters whenever there is an emergency like this: food, water and sanitation, health, protection, and other sectors. And we normally have the strategic coordination meeting here in Abuja. Each ministry that has a responsibility is talking with. I'm really surprised if you say you go to camps and there is no food and there is no water. I'm really surprised.
It's the report we've gotten. We had we had some of this report on air. But let's bring Lindsay in at this point. You're a veteran journalist. Now, the last time Nigeria experienced this kind of flood was 29 years ago. What is your assessment of the situation?
My assessment is not just about the emergency, but it's about the clear unpreparedness of government to have understood that they need to manage the river systems. River systems are, for me, the major resource of Nigeria. It's what makes Nigeria one country. When you look at it, it's unique. This nation is unique in the way 2 major rivers join at the Lokoja confluence and turn into the Niger, the lower Niger, that becomes the Niger Delta. I always tell people, when my people, I am from the Niger Delta, when my people talk about being on your own, there is no delta without a river. There are rivers that don't even end in deltas, but there is no delta without a major river system. And everything you have in the delta is based on historic deposit or historic flooding. Everything, even the oil we have, it's centuries of deposits that have turned into oil. Why has this country not built along the lines of the wonderful explanation that Mr. Prince Akolokwu gives? Why haven't we had more flood channels? I've never seen a flood channel anywhere in the north. Yet we knew these things were coming. There is not the rivers are not utilized for irrigation and so on, because when you utilize rivers for such uses, you prepare for the overflow. What the Cameroons have done is they prepared that when the river rose too high, they released water. We should have known that that was coming. So I see the whole thing as the basic unpreparedness is not just NEMA being unprepared for emergency, but it's for us to have another look at the way we view our resources, we view our river channels, and manage them properly. And for this, I believe the discarding, or rather the mismanagement and ignorance of the wonderful river basin authorities is one of the great tragedies of Nigerian development.
All right. Still on you, Lindsay. Let's look at Nigeria and their fire brigade method, because you've talked about us not being prepared for emergencies like this. And, you know, talking about experts and warnings, you know, little wonder people say, we Nigerians, the Nigerian government, do not have, you know, do not listen to their own experts and prefer to wait for the higher minds from across the borders to bring the word, the final words, before they take heed to them. Now, let's look at that reaction from government to expert warnings. And also, let's also look at the responsibilities of citizens building on channels, on drainage channels, and the responsibility that has cost them as well.
Well, you know, my nation is a nation in which the fire brigade approach to development has become conventional. By that I mean that we seem to see emergencies coming in various areas, and we say, oh, it won't happen. And when it happens, we throw money at it, or we throw... I don't think they don't just listen to local experts. They don't listen to any expert. You know, this is probably one of the problems. But frankly, I come back to that issue of we have systems in place. Lulu tells us about, Lulu spoke very articulately about what needs to be done and what has been done. But as you, both of you have pointed out to him, the reports are there, the evidence is there. I mean, that thing that's happening, the transport cock-up on the other side of the Niger and down to Lokoja, I don't care what NEMA says. The point is, this should not have happened. We should have been better prepared. And I say we have ignored the value of the river basin authorities. If Nigeria was focusing on its true development, the development of all its resources, not just oil, but agriculture, we wouldn't have these floods at this level. Because we would have managed our river system.
Okay, let me bring this to Prince Akolokwu. Now, dams are usually constructed to impound water and control flood. Some have argued that maybe Nigeria needs more dams. What, do you agree?
Well, I do not entirely agree that we need to put dams everywhere, particularly hydroelectric dams. In fact, what we have may even be enough. But what we need are what we call earth dams with canals that will channel the excess water that we experience in our major river courses. Now, when NEMA talks about even early warnings, the warnings are not comprehensive. It appears to me that NEMA tended to have focused attention on the northern states, up to Lokoja. At best, in their listing, have been monitoring their warning systems, they end in Delta. They don't even remember that the Niger is even more devastating, because all the waters are gathered move for 3 months before they get to the Delta. And then it's like the river Niger ends in Delta states. It is not. The river Niger, in fact, the more devastating effect is in rivers Bayelsa, and then some parts of Delta. And the NEMA warning didn't even include Bayelsa. It didn't mention it. After the bifurcation, the Niger simply disappears. There's a place called, you just call it Ofonimea. Birds cannot fly past. That's the last bifurcation of the Niger that goes into Odi, Trofani, Agbere, Udoni, Kayama, up to Amasoma. Then the right side takes you to Patani, Sabama, and down until you enter the Focados River, because the river Niger is the only river, like I said elsewhere, that doesn't seem to have a mouth in the Atlantic Ocean. When it gets into Bomadi, it simply disappears. And then NEMA did not know that the river Niger is that complicated, so we need to have a comprehensive understanding of the river system itself. Now we come back to the issue of dams. I want to use two examples. I have visited a place called Mayo Belwa in Adamawa State, where Admiral Muratola Nyako, I'm a very proud person to recognize the initiative of Admiral Nyako as about the most experienced farmer in Nigeria. Admiral Nyako went to establish several farms in Mayo Belwa local government area. Mayo Belwa is one of those areas that wouldn't have a lot of water, but he harvested runoff water from Mayo Ine, from Gurore and all that, and created a huge farm. He has an air dam, one individual, which he built over the years, collecting water. It is with that he's growing all kinds of crops in Nigeria. Now, come to Abuja. Look at Jabi, for instance. Federal government gave contract to Julius Berger to build some roads to Kadu, to Clive Camp and all that. And Julius Berger simply created an air dam. That is in Lakeview today.
Yes.
The houses on the Lakeview are the most expensive in Abuja. There was no river there. They simply harvested runoff water from everywhere, including the little ones that came from the Lower Usman Dam, and built a massive house estate. Today, a 3-bedroom flat in the Lakeview costs as much as 50 million naira. That is planning. Now, you look at the river system in Nigeria. We built the Kainji Dam and built an 85 radius lake called the Kainji Lake. You can build a number of them like that without necessarily building hydroelectric dam, because that would be more expensive. So every state, every stakeholder, local governments, on the course of these major rivers, we should be able to create large expanses of land, because they now become strategic reservoirs for water, for irrigation, for agricultural purposes, for grazing. We are talking about creating grazing reserves. All these reserves, those ones, we don't need to name them by law as creating grazing reserves. You can create reservoirs in Mayo Belwa. You can create my reservoir in a place called Loko, which is another Fulani enclave in some local government area of Adamawa State. You can create around the Karim Lamido. You can come down the river. You can create around Ebonyi, where you have a lot of agricultural activities off the cross river, because many people don't even know that Ebonyi is on the border of the cross river. That will bring me to the issue of the river basin authorities and the politicization of their creation, because they do not reflect what the river systems in Nigeria are. If you ask me, if I have enough time, I'm going to talk about my views about the river basin authorities and why there are incongruencies and inconsistencies.
Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. I'll come back to you. Now, let me get back to Al Hassan. Now, looking at evacuation, because it's a really important aspect of emergency. A lot of people say their lives and, of course, their family's life, properties would have been saved if they were evacuated, and there was a method for evacuation and people knew where they were going. That's number one. Number two, the federal government has set up a committee to assist and take, these people down to the places where there's damages have occurred to find out solutions to it. But we have NEMA. And of course, we have commissioners for health in the states. So a lot of the arguments is that why don't we use the people in the states who know how the shoe fits and know how painful this situation has been to them to use to tackle the menace. And of course, NEMA can collaborate, because you have said quite clearly that it's not just a job for NEMA alone. So how do you begin to see that?
Well, thank you very much. Let me quickly clear some doubts here. The NEMA warnings are not manufactured by NEMA. They are scientific, and they were gotten from agencies that have the mandate and have the authority to do that. NIMET and Federal Ministry of Environment gives us this warning. We only disseminate and we coordinate and we prepare to act on the emergency implications of those warnings. Okay. And I remember that part of the warning, Bayelsa State is part of it, and we have communicated to the state also. Then on the issue of the committee evacuation, that NEMA has, the country has an evacuation, search and rescue and epidemic evacuation plan. For all the 9 major scenarios that happen, there is an elaborate system of evacuation. If it is flood, who takes the lead at the strategic, at the tactical and the operational level? If it is fire, who takes the lead? If it is epidemic, who takes? It's very elaborate, and all the stakeholders, they know these responsibilities. If in case of flooding like this, the Federal Fire Service take the lead.
How come the local Abuja, government, so it's very hard to, it was really rather late to get help to them. A lot of people were complaining that they were abandoned there for 3 days and no help came to them until the media system was able to highlight, the extent of that damage. So where do you begin to, address that?
But the firefighters, were they there on time? Did NEMA collaborate with them at any point?
They were there, and the collaboration was on. And right now, up to this moment, the search and rescue continues. Right. You see, when these warnings are given, the community themselves sometimes they are reluctant. Right now, there is a village in Kogi. Up to yesterday, we were there. The community was asked to move. But they are reluctant. They say they are praying.
No, sir, unfortunately, we don't have enough time. We have to round off. We know that a lot of people, said no when they were asked to leave, because one of the fears, and you don't blame them, is that where do we go to and all of that. So we don't have time. But before we go, we have to talk about next time, because there's no guarantee that this will not happen again. The Senate has urged the federal government to submit a supplementary budget to tackle this now and in the future. What kind of programs and policies should be implemented before this happens again? Very briefly, let's say, really don't have time, wrapping up.
With the experience they've had, just as you both pointed out in your introduction, Hurricane Isaac was stronger than Katrina, but much less damaging because of the lessons learned from Katrina. Let's hope we will learn lessons from here. And the revival of the importance of river basin authorities should be one of the things.
All right. Thank you very much for that last word. Let's look at the topic again. We've been looking at ferry floats, counting the losses of next time. He's saying to be better prepared will be the key, because we'll have learned lessons from this event and from this happenings with the flood that happened, or is still happening. So I hope that NEMA will be quicker to respond next time in future, and people will get the warning, because it's great to be forewarned.
Can I say one last thing?
Oh, go ahead.
NEMA has all the procedures and systems to contain the emergency.
Okay.
But in the medium to long term response, there is need for a conscious urban planning, because with that, I've been opportunity to visit the Netherlands. 40% of Netherlands is below sea level, and yet the population, the industry is living with the hazard, and there is no problem.
All right.
So when you have a good urban planning, nothing prevents hazard, population and industry to cohabit together without a disaster.
Thank you very much. Conscious urban planning, and that is what our Hassan Nuhu has said. He's the Deputy Director Planning, Research and Forecasting, National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. We've also had Prince and Barrister Shedrack Akolokwu, political economics, mass communicator, sustainable development expert and lawyer. Thank you for coming to Kakaki this morning. And we've also had Lindsay Barrett, veteran journalist. Thank you for coming to Kakaki this morning.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, you've heard it all, and like they say, we are still fighting the fight, and I'm sure that a lot of people will be better informed and better prepared for next time. And to all those people who have lost people and properties, we say, well, our heart goes out to you, and to the lives lost, may your souls rest in peace. Perfect. We'll have a second interview, but we'll take that right after this break. Stay with us. you